And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 96. Today we're going to be talking about the love photo challenge. Last week I set a challenge, I gave some ideas about how to try and capture this intense emotion between people or people and animals or whatever in a photo. Not just taking a photo of the object of our love, but actually trying to be able to photograph a connection between that is visible to anybody else taking a look at this photo, even if they didn't happen to know the people involved. That was the challenge, and we've had 12 people respond to it, and so today we're going to look through those photos, maybe comment a bit on it, and and hopefully maybe be a little bit inspired about where we can go next with our own photography. So, here we are, live on YouTube, and if you're here, the chat box is open, leave me a comment, say hello, say where you're from, tell me what the weather's like, and we'll have a bit of chat going. And periodically, I will, as we're looking through the photos, I'll pause between each photo, flip back, and if you've got any observations, comments, or questions, then feel free to ask, and I'll do my best to respond. So we are now at, actually just before I get on to that, what I would like to also say at this point is thank you to each and every one of you who turned up during the week on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday when I was doing a set of podcasts commissioned specially for the Kukubri Galleries in response to the McKinnon Collection photo exhibition that's on there currently at the moment. Of old photos dating from the sort of 1850s to 1950s. So that was the first time I'd really done a podcast that was specifically commissioned for somebody else rather than just doing my usual Sunday thing. So it was really useful, great help for everybody who turned up, gave me that little bit of support, asked questions, made the podcast seem that bit more lively rather than me just sort of going out there wildly on my own. So I greatly appreciate that. So smug points for everybody who turned up. And if you didn't get a chance to see them, actually, if you go to my youtube.com/Kim Ayres channel, then you'll find playlists. There's the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres playlist, but you'll also find a McKinnon Collection playlist as well. So there were 3 podcasts done. One was an introduction to the idea of understanding narrative in photography, one was understanding composition in photography, and one was understanding light in photography. So they're still there, so you can always go along and take a look as well. Well, I talk not just about my own photos, but also photos from the McKinnon Collection. So I hope you find those interesting, and thank you again for everybody who turned up to support me with that. I can see we've got a few comments in already, so let's see who we've got in. Oh, Meg says good afternoon, everyone. April says good morning from a snowy one on Long Island, New York. Pat says is in from Minehead in Somerset and says it's raining there. The Bevs says hi, all. Karen here from hi Karen from a not so sunny Shipley. Is that Shipley, Yorkshire, I think. So first time of tuning in, looking forward to it. Well, welcome Karen, glad you could make it along. Then a couple of people saying hello to Karen. Sandra says hello everyone, it's lovely to watch a live episode again. Yeah, it's been a couple of episodes since we last saw you live chatting, so welcome back Sandra. Peacock Photography says good early morning. This is Katie from Australia, so yeah, early morning hours for Katie. Robert says howdy all from Texas. Diane says hi from Warwickshire, and Rosemary says good morning from a frosty Washington state. Wow, so we've got, oddly enough, actually, Rosemary and Katie are probably closer in time to each other than they are to me, which is kind of a bit strange, but even though they're at opposite ends of the day, or a day apart, you're both on different dates. Wow. So we're really spanning the globe here, which is kind of wonderful, I think. So, right, okay, so what I wanted to talk about then is love. Tomorrow is Valentine's Day, and so 6 weeks ago, when I was sort of doing a rough plan for the next few weeks, what I was going to be talking about in the podcast, I thought, Valentine's Day is coming up. Love, that's a great one. Let's throw that idea in. And it seemed like a really good idea. And then for last week's episode, as I was starting to try and work out how I was going to explain it, the kind of photos I was going to use, I realised actually this is a much trickier one to do than I'd initially thought. And it took a lot of thought and effort to try and find a way in that I thought would be fairly straightforward for anybody else attempting to get it, and feeling a bit limited on the number of photos that I had. And we're up against the real problem that when you're trying to photograph a connection between people, the very presence of the photographer can profoundly affect that connection because they're aware of the photographer. So you either have to be kind of sneaky about it, it can kind of be a little bit voyeuristic, but you know, so you're either trying to capture people or you're trying to capture them off guard, or you've kind of got to create an atmosphere where people are so relaxed in your presence that they can kind of relax with each other and have that connection too. All these are really difficult, and I think that's been really reflected as well in the photos that have been sent through for this challenge. What we'll do is we'll go through and I'll show you some of the photos, and I think there's been some sort of there's various kind of almost common themes of people struggling with trying to really nail this one down, and fully understandable as well, because like I say, in the end it all seemed like a great idea at the time, and sort of this week as we've been building up to it, I've been partially regretting setting this challenge, because actually it's a bit of a pig of a challenge to try and pull off successfully. So what we'll do is let's get hold of some photos. Let's make a start. What I will do, I will start actually with Nicola, who I thought had done a really lovely photo, which does really capture that sense here. So Nicola said, "Hi Kim, here's my submission for the Love Photo Challenge. I've submitted a cropped mono version of the shot as I felt the colour was too overbearing." Now she has also sent in the colour version, which was this, and I can actually see I can see where you're coming from with that, Nicola. That actually this really bright pink top and the sort of strong reddish colour of the collar really become very dominant, and your eye actually gets drawn more to the colour, or it's rather the colours competing with the beautiful expression of your daughter's face. So by going back and putting this in black and white, we don't have that anymore. Our eyes get drawn straight to the eyes of your daughter. So I think that was a good call with your editing there. She goes on to say, the only thing I would have liked to improve is that the side sunlight, it was quite intense, particularly on the blonde hair. It was an impromptu shot, so I had to grab the moment before the dog moved. I would like to have taken from further back and would like to allow for even more cropping. But thanks for the challenge. I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Well, I think at this point, Nicola, that really it is one of those things whereby when you are trying to capture that, you see the instant and you've got to grab it, and you don't always have the chance to properly calculate and say, well, actually this will work better if I was 2 foot further back, if I managed to realign so that bit of window wasn't in, or this bit or whatever was there. Sometimes you just got to grab the moment. And in the end, if you get the right moment, then I think the power of the emotional bit that gets transmitted actually trumps the technicals. Now, in an ideal world, we get the technicals, we get the lines, the composition, the lighting and everything else perfectly right, as well as the emotion. That's ultimately what we're all aiming for. We want to get the narrative, we want to get the emotion, we want to get the composition, we want to get the light, and everything sort of all kind of coming together. But if all else fails, at the very least, get the emotion, get the narrative. And I think, but also having said that, I like the composition with this. The composition, because you've got it on the diagonals, because of the way the dog's head comes down, your daughter's arm comes up, her head is beautifully framed within this. And I love there's that expression, she's just nuzzling into the dog and she's so happy with that, and she's looking at you and she's happy about that. And I love the expression on the dog's face. The dog is just a kind of wistful notion to it. He's obviously just really used to and comfortable, and loves your daughter as well, and he's very, very comfortable in that kind of being snuggled into. So I think in terms of the remit for this one, I think you really captured it. We do have that sense of an emotional connection. And there's an emotional connection between your daughter and your dog, but then we've also got that emotional connection between your daughter and you as well. She's looking into the camera and she's clearly feeling relaxed and happy and more than happy to be there with her mum pointing the camera at her. So, smug points for you there, Nicola. Great start. Thank you so much for sending that one in. Right, okay, let's take a flip back, see what other comments we've got here. Where are we at? Oh, Naria's here, says hello everyone. Katie says black and white photo is gorgeous. Sandra says the black and white image works very well, lovely photo. Rosemary says, Nicola, that's such a precious, loving photo of your daughter and dog. April also says it's an adorable photo. Pat says, loving the expression on the dog pulls the heartstrings. And Katie agrees, unconditional love, beautiful eyes in both daughter and dog. Yeah, I think. Bev's Karen, yes, it will take me a little while to latch on here. Karen is one of these problems I often have. People on YouTube, that happens in other social media as well, but I always find it confusing because your handle on YouTube is different from the name that I would call you. So likewise, Murphy says hi is in fact Robert. Yeah, and there's a Peacock is Katie. So there's a little bit whereby there's moments of pauses because I'm looking at names here and translating before I kind of get involved in the comments. Right, yes. So where are we? Yes. So Karen says, yeah, dog looks very content. And Sandra says, I meant to say the black and white image looks much better. Yeah. Okay, I'm with you with that. Okay, so let's move on then. So next photo was sent in by Diane. And Diane now is quite a small version. So I'll zoom in a little bit here, but we do have a slight problem whereby, because it was a small version put in, it's going to get pixelated very quickly. But Diane says, this is my grandson and his girlfriend Kim. I mean, a girl called Kim? Surely not. It was taken in my son's garden. I was trying to capture their love by asking them to look into each other's eyes. I also tried to include the lovely raised bed of tropical plants and the olive tree. Wow, trying to get a little bit of everything in here, Diane. Now, I think certainly there's a relaxed bit of fun. There's self-consciousness here. You can see the self-consciousness on your grandson's face, but with his girlfriend just sort of laughing away, the tension is getting broken. You can feel a warmth and a connection there, which is good. So smug points for that. Now, what I would say here, though, is I think your kind of desperation to get the olive tree and the raised bed and plants and stuff in the background as well is maybe a sort of slight kind of distraction from if what you're really trying to do is capture the connection between them, then it has to be about them. The garden is just a setting, and if you kind of concentrating too much on the setting. Now, if you're wanting to see a couple in the setting, and the setting is actually the dominant narrative, then you need to be further back. You need to have them in the distance, and then what you've got is you've got a beautiful garden and you've got a young couple in love just in the distance, but actually the narrative is about the garden. But that's not what you're saying. You've submitted this photo as the narrative being about the young couple, in which case I think you've got to make more of that connection and less of the garden. And quite simply, really, it's a case of zooming in, because if we sort of, I think if you kind of come in, if you're cropping something a little bit more like this, this is where the action is. This is where the narrative is. The narrative isn't about the garden. The narrative is about the young couple looking into each other's eyes. Self-consciousness or not, laughter, whatever it is. And at this point, when we come into here, actually your desperation to include some of the plants in the background, like this, the red flower here, actually becomes a little bit of a distraction. We've talked before about red can quite often act as quite an overpowering colour, and so kind of has to be used carefully. And she's already got a red dress on, which is kind of pulling our eye a little bit like the problem that Nicola had with her daughter wearing the pink top. But then we've also got this splash of red against the green background, and because that's kind of an opposite colour on the colour wheel, that stands out even more. So our eye gets dragged over there rather than our eye getting taken specifically to the couple, which is actually what the narrative is about. So the key thing here is to remember what's your narrative, and if your and then everything else about it, the background, the leading lines, the composition, the lighting, everything else is supposed to be in support of the key narrative. And if the key narrative is about the couple, then you get in close. So hope that gives you a few bits of ideas, but lovely connection, and yeah, always lovely. I mean, to see your grandchild happy and in love, yeah, that's a lovely thing. So thanks very much for sending that one in, Diane. Right. Where are we? Okay, so you're right. Oh, right. Karen says, no worries, I'm hard to offend. That's a relief. Diane says her name's Sophie. I did take a closer one too. Ah, yes, but you didn't submit that one. April says, perfect combo of the couple and the garden, but it looks good cropped. Sandra says they look like a lovely couple and happy together. Katie says, I like it cropped. I like how it cropped off her body language. Her body language of coyness. Yeah, it does kind of change it a little bit. Rosemary says the crop also eliminates the self-conscious hands in Jean's pocket and the space between them. Diane says, thanks, I'll try and remember everything. Cool. Okay, excellent. So let's move on then to Laurie, who has also been out photographing young couples. In this case, Laurie says, I have never this is Laurie from Oregon, who says, I've never posted here before, but I have watched several of your videos, Kim, and find them very instructive. That's always good to know. It says, I live in Oregon, and this photo is of my daughter, Meg. Oh, I've got a daughter, Meg, too. And her boyfriend, Michael. I've got a brother, Michael. Yeah, some common names flying about, and given the fact that you're the last Diane's grandson's girlfriend was called Meg, and I've got a daughter called Meg, there seems to be certain names flying about today. Anyway, so then this is at a nearby wildlife refuge on a recent snowy day. So this is a photo where actually making much more of the surroundings, and there's something about a snowy day which is magical. You have that kind of almost fairy tale feel with snow in the woods, a path through the woods, a young couple holding hands. So you're definitely onto something here. Now, if we actually zoom in here to get a closer up look of the couple, this is one of those things where actually it doesn't work quite so well because there's just a bit too much self-consciousness. What's clearly happened is they're walking along and you've yelled to one or both of them to turn around, and they both turn around. They know you're with the camera. They're kind of not entirely sure. There's such a look of it's like awkwardness and hesitation. Oh God, she's got the camera. I better smile. Click, too late. She looks like she's not entirely sure what's going on either. So at this point, actually, the connection isn't between them either. So if we're talking about trying to capture that notion of connection, the close-up in this instance kind of fails because the connection isn't with them, and the connection isn't really with you, the photographer, either, because they're just feeling awkward in front of the camera. This is where it actually does work better when you're further out, because the connection then is in the fact that they're holding hands. And then the path, that sort of, we've got the posts of the fence running either side, which is sort of containing them. The path is leading them into this magical landscape. So it's a beautiful setting, and the connection comes through the hand holding. It's just a slight shame, really, that there's just a little bit too much awkwardness and self-consciousness. I think one of these things as well is, and this will be a theme that crops up quite a lot today, and is always one of these problems, is that you as the parent, and just like Diane as the grandparent, or whatever, is we're biased. We see our son, grandson, granddaughter, child, pet, whatever, and we already have the love for them. And so when you look at that photo of the young lad with the awkwardness on his face, actually that awkward smile just gives you the pangs of love even more, because you've got the mother's love. But for anybody who's not that mother, what you see is a young man who's looking a bit awkward. And so that translation of love doesn't necessarily come across. And I think it's one of the biggest things that we as photographers, not just in this this particular challenge, but in almost every photo we ever take, one of our biggest challenges is our own connection with what it is we're photographing. And if the photo is only for ourselves, then that's not a problem. But if we ever want other people to look at this photo and get the feeling that we have to come at it from a different angle. We have to be able to view the photo and go, how would this photo seem to somebody who doesn't know the people involved with it, or it doesn't know the place, if it's about a landscape or a town or a city? How do I translate that story across? And that ultimately is the challenge that all photographers are facing who ever want to have their photos viewed by somebody else. But I love the setting of this, Laurie, so thank you very much for sending that one in. Rosemary says, hi, Laurie from Oregon, a neighbour. Sandra says, interesting setting with the winter snow. Peacock Katie says, the shape of their bodies together is like a heart. And April also agrees, a very beautiful setting. Okay, so let's move on. So Katie then. So Katie in Australia, because of course we're in the middle of winter here in the Northern Hemisphere, but of course it's middle of summer down in Australia. So Katie took this photo and says, this photo was taken when I located my Nikon that I hadn't used for a number of years. I went to a friend's daughter's 6th birthday party back in December and took these photos outside of where the party was being held just after the party. I took the photo of the family of 4, my friend and the birthday girl and her brother. I liked the photo. I liked taking the photo as they were organising their children for the photo. To me, it shows a nesting feeling, a family who are focused on their children. Parents who love and care for their children, but particularly a son who adores his father. Okay, so you've got friends, you've got their kids, you've got a chance to take a photo out the back. You find a blank wall, you take the photo. Excellent. That's exactly what you're trying to do. And you quite like the fact that it's a moment where the parents are kind of fussing to put the kids in place. Almost, it's like a photo of the pre-part of the photo as such, which can sometimes throw up some really kind of fun results. What I would say here, Katie, is that I think this is another one of those which I was just talking about, where you already have the connection and what you're seeing doesn't necessarily translate to the same extent. Any parent will recognise that notion of having kids, trying to push them into place and get them ready. This photo is actually becomes all about the young boy who's the one staring straight into the camera. Nobody else is looking at the camera. Your friend here, there's a sort of tension around the mouth. She's sort of quite tight-lipped as she's sort of trying to organise. In case the girl whose birthday it is doesn't kind of look like she's overly interested in being in the photo. So it's more a kind of slight parental struggle. We can't really fully make out the photo here, apart from the fact that he's trying to sort of push everybody into place. And I think the other thing is when you're talking about a family photo, while you've got the arms coming down, it's cut off. The hand's cut off here. We're missing the hand here. And there's a sense of we're quite high up looking down. And one of the tricks, here's one of these tricks if you weren't already aware of it, Katie, which is when you're photographing children in particular, one of the best things you can do is get down to the child's level. And I think if you were to sort of, crouch down, kneel down, or just squat slightly and sort of be so that your camera is pretty much at the eye level of the young boy and girl, then you're really gonna feel like you're in there with the kids. And then that sense of the family and the parents surrounding, maybe you don't need as much on the top of the, above the head, but you would also need to be at the lower so that you then get the hands of the parents coming round as well, holding them, enveloping them, keeping them safe. That connection. And if it's the connection that you're looking for, you're trying to go for that sort of connection between them. You say, great love between, how the boy adores his father. That's something it's not something we necessarily know because he's not looking at his father, he's looking out at us. So it's a very tricky thing that for you, the connection's there because you know these people and you know the stories and you know how they all relate to each other. For us, the viewers who don't, is how well does that come across? So something to keep in mind. And like I say, I think the real trick here, one of the big tricks for you would be to have squatted down a bit and get at a lower angle. It really does make all the difference. One of the first things, if you're ever photographing children, likewise animals and pets and what have you, by and large, one of the best things you can do is be down at the level. If you think back to that photo that Nicola took that we looked at the beginning, you know, we're down at pet and child level rather than standing up looking down on it. So, hope that gives you some thoughts and ideas. Thanks very much for taking part and sending that one in, Katie. So, where are we? Karen just talking about the snow one, saying, great setting, good leading lines, nice shot from the distance, hand holding and his foot pointing towards her. Katie says, yes, summer and hot indeed. Yellow Leaf Production says, hi, a bit late in. Helga. Right, yes, again, trying to remember the names with the different handles. Helga, thank you very much for, glad you could turn up. Pap says, reluctant models. April says, the boy has beautiful eyes. Katie says, yeah, tired and hot after the party. This is why I needed help here. And goes on to say, good feedback. Oh, well, I'm glad that was useful. Sandra says, family looking a little bit uncomfortable. Yeah, but you can create some fun photos out of that as well, especially for the family who will sort of recognise the connections as well. Okay, so let's move on then. So to continue in the Love Photo Challenge. Now, next up we have Alex, and Alex sent in this elderly couple caught in Bridgenorth. And I think Pat in the comments said, did they know the photo was being taken? To which Alex said, oh, no, absolutely not. This was sneaked in. So in a photo like this, we can't actually see the face. All we've got to go on is the body language, the arm around her. So I think really, Alex, it's while I see where you're coming here, and there you can see the arm around, we're not really, there are actually a number of ways you can interpret this. I think we can't see where her arm is. Her head isn't nestling into him. He's got his arm around her. The way the jacket kind of comes up looks and feels almost slightly awkward. I also think there's a sort of thing here about distance. Very often with photos, there's a notion of either you need to get closer in or you need to be further out. A little bit like we were talking earlier with Diane's photo, I think it is, with her grandson and his girlfriend, where she's taking in the garden. You either need to be further out and have the garden and then just have the figures in it, or you need to be closer in because it's the people and the garden is just a sort of slight bit of background. And I think it's almost identical here, that when we look at this, we've got the benches, we've got sort of surrounds. Now, these look like public gardens. Now, they could be really interesting. I think if you were much further out and you were taking photos of the gardens, and these public gardens would then be accentuated by having a small little, kind of in the distance but still noticeable, couple sitting in a bench where an arm's going, he's putting his arm around her. But at that point, the story is then about the gardens and people enjoying the gardens. If you're talking about the photo being about the connection with the couple themselves, this is where essentially, like the crop comes in, this is what you're going for. You're needing to be further in, you're needing to be getting a sense of them. So this theme, I think, is sort of one of those that sort of runs throughout throughout today's podcast. What we're trying to do is find that connection, and if it's about the people, then you need to be closer in with the people. So I hope that gives you a few thoughts there, Alex. Now, before I flick back to the comments, what I'm going to do is I'm going to contrast this one directly with the one Sophie sent in, which was another couple on the bench. And this one from Sophie, I think, works so much better, because now we are closer in and we can see her arm coming back around him, and we can see the way that her head is nestled into his shoulder. And for me, this photo is one where we feel it. We absolutely feel it. We can't help but, depending on who you identify with, if you identify with the bloke, you know what it feels like to have her head snuggled in while you've got her arm, maybe they're in love, maybe he's comforting her, maybe they're struggling. We don't know the story that's going on here, but he is holding her close and she wants to be held close. Alternatively, if you're identifying with her, then she can't get close enough. She's just burying herself into him, feeling his arm around her, feeling the protection and the closeness and the warmth of it. Now, there are other bits of the photo where you go, it's a little bit of a shame he's got a black lump sort of pulling out of his head, and it's a shame that the gate, the fence rather, on the other side of them is kind of blocking what would otherwise be quite a beautiful view of the lake. But in terms of that notion of capturing the moment being more important than some of the other technical considerations, I think you've really caught the moment here. I think you really do have that. The body language really is expressing that connection. So smug points, I think, for you there, Sophie. I can't help, even though I can't see the expressions on their face, I can feel the connection, and that's really what I was hoping that people would be able to send me for this. That's really what the whole challenge was about. So thank you very much for sending that one in, Sophie. Okay, couple of what have we got next? Jack says hi. Getting late getting on. Glad you could make it, Jack. Sandra says, I think the plants in front of the bench are blocking the interaction with the couple. That's the one for that Alex did, and I think you're right. You know, we know where Alex was going with that, but there was, you know, the kind of layout wasn't properly working with it. Onto Sophie's picture, and April says really big hug. Katie says, I see consoling love. Oh, John's here from Ohio. Glad you could make it, John. Sandra says you can see the human interaction and affection in this photo. Helga agrees, and Rosemary says a really warm connection, Sophie. Yeah, I think it really is. So that's if you're going to do a kind of a couple from the bench from behind, then if you can't see the faces and you can't see the connection, then the body language is absolutely what it's all about. And importantly, the body language has to be mutual, I think, really, to get that proper connection. If the body language is on one side and not necessarily on the other, then you end up with kind of other ways of interpreting it, which aren't necessarily the way what you are necessarily trying to express. Right, okay. So just a wee reminder, by the way, that with these podcasts, if you find them useful, interesting, you feel you're learning something from them, you find it entertaining, and you would like to support them, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do that. Another way you can support these podcasts is to invite your friends along. Let's try and build this wonderful community of ours. Right, so let's move on. Next up, we'll go for Robert. And Robert said, I'm out of town at the moment and thought I was going to be able to edit a photo, but I don't actually have one in my library. I do have a cell phone shot of Anne and our blind dog, but I'm not so sure it's a great photo. A little blurry, and the photo of Anne is possibly only of interest to me. And Robert's kind of going, excuse. But still wanted to put it in. So this is the photo we have of Anne with the dog. And I think by and large, Robert, you're kind of right in the fact, it is a bit blurry. We've got bits and pieces. It's kind of odd, really. I was thinking about this one a lot, about the connection. Because whilst the dog's clearly having a bit of fun, rolling about on the carpet, Anne may well have been lying on the carpet just rubbing the dog's belly moments before. This photo isn't really about the connection between Anne and your dog. And in terms of creating a photo of connection, generally speaking, what we're talking about, if you've got two elements, two people, person, animal, what we're looking for is the connection between them in the photo. And there isn't the connection there because the dog's lying on his back, having he's obviously quite happy. Anne isn't, now if Anne was about, now if you were pulled further back and Anne was rubbing the belly or about to rub the belly or was looking at the dog and laughing, then you would have the connection. But Anne's looking directly at you. Now what I would say though is that is a really soft, lovely expression on Anne's face. So actually this photo here, the connection is between Anne and you. The connection is between the photographer and subject. And as such, if that then becomes the core connection of the photo, if that's really what the narrative of this photo is, which is Anne's connection with you, then actually your dog is a distraction from that. If we talk about the notion that every element of a photo is either contributing to the narrative or detracting from the narrative, if the photo is about the connection between you and Anne, actually the dog is kind of detracting from the narrative a bit. If the connection's between Anne and the dog, then the fact she's looking at you rather than at the dog, that's kind of missed. So it's one of those things whereby the narrative could have gone in either direction and sort of slightly misses on this. But, you know, for all that, I think the fact that Anne is looking at it, you know, I clock a connection between, you know, between subject and photographer. So you kind of, there's something there. There's definitely something there, Robert. But, you know, for the reasons I've talked about, I think, you know, it's kind of sort of slightly missed on. If you've gone one way, you need to do that, and if you've gone the other way, you needed to do the other. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense. But, you know, thanks for sending that one in. Okay. Where are we? Karen says, enjoying the photos and the helpful comments. Oh, that's great. I'm glad you are. Robert says, the picture was taken shortly after we adopted Trevor. Trevor being the dog. He had only one eye and is now completely blind. He had 2 teeth and now has none. And he also only has half a jaw. As heartworm positive he was heartworm positive and had parasites. Even though he had all these problems, he was still a very happy lad. He's now very healthy and a beloved member of the family. Trevor really does live in the moment and never let the handicaps prevent him from enjoying life to the fullest. Well, that's lovely and that's really heartwarming. And I know we've talked a little bit before about your Trevor. I think he appeared in one of the very first photos you actually sent in as well. And so, you see, I mean, interestingly, there it's a really heartwarming story, and we connect. What we're doing here is we're connecting with the story. What might be interesting is how would you, if you were wanting to try and get that narrative into a photo, how would you photograph Trevor? And I think that's obviously a different photo challenge entirely. Or if you were trying to get a photo of the connection between you and Trevor, or between Trevor and Anne, or between the three of you, how would you set that up? And like I say, it's a different kind of challenge. Well, maybe, I don't know. I'm not going to expect you to sort of leap out, especially if you're not at home at the moment. You're not going to be able to do it. But maybe worth having just a little brainstorm for a moment there, Robert, thinking, well, okay, if you were to have set out, if you'd had the opportunity to set out and create that photo where you were looking for that strong emotional connection between either Anne and Trevor, or yourself and Trevor, or the both of you and Trevor, how might you have gone about it? So I don't expect you to type an answer straight away, just something to think about, because if you do think about it, then I think in turn that might help your approach to the photography and, you know, capturing that connection in a later shoot. So thanks very much for sending that. April says, very caring of you to help Trevor. Awesome. And Pat says, Trevor is a hero. Cool. Okay, so next up we have a photo from John, and John says, this is not the photo I wanted to post, but it was done at the same shoot. So I did ask John, well, if it wasn't the photo you wanted to post, where is the photo you wanted to post? And he said, I couldn't find it. So fair enough. I think we've all got problems with this, depending on, are you one of these people? Here's a question. Are you one of those people who's very, very organised with your photos? Or is it just chaotically, everything's just randomly dragged onto the desktop or put into random folders? Or do you have, how organised is your photo collection, and how easy is it for you to find any of your photos at a later date? If you're sitting there thinking, oh, I know I've got the perfect photo to put in for this challenge, would you know how to find it again? Question to have a think about. Now, in fact, actually, I do a question of the week, which I put into the Facebook group. This week, because I was so busy with the Kakubri Galleries set of podcasts that I did on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday evening, completely went out of my mind. So Anyway, maybe I should put that photo. I'll maybe put that question in for next week then. How organised is your photo collection, and could you find a photo if you want it? I'll drop that one into the Facebook group. But even if you don't do Facebook, yeah, have a think about this one and throw in a comment, or throw in a comment for next week. Right, okay. Oh, Robert says thanks for all the feedback, and Katie says organised chaos, but I'm getting better. John says mostly organised, but it could be better. I think probably find most of us are a could be better kind of level. Right, okay. So let's move on to John's photo. So John says. No, sorry, that's still Robert's photo. There we go, John's photo. So John says, this shoot took place in an old factory and was rented for the day. Different temporary studio setups were erected and models were hired. It was a long day shooting many scenarios. I like this particular one with the window light behind them. So you like this one, John, because of the lighting. What was interesting with this, I think Pat's left in the comments saying something like the half nudity suggests more sex than love, and I think there is. I think Pat's really onto a point here, and I think you might have even agreed with her in the comments. What we're talking about here is trying to get the connection, the emotional connection with them, and and I think actually we're kind of distracted by the semi-nudity in this. Lots of flesh. There's also the fact that they're both this photo is all about vertical lines. The both of them tend to be very strong. We've got the window frame behind, we've got the horizontal of the brickwork behind them, and so it's a very kind of static image, which doesn't necessarily create a kind of a sense of movement or emotional connection. The real connection here, I think, if you're trying to go for the emotional connection, is again happening all up in the top part. And I think if you sort of crop that, some more or less like that, maybe just tilt it a fraction so that that straight line going up is off to one side. Also, perhaps slightly better if that window frame wasn't going straight through the middle of her head. But that aside, I think a crop like this actually becomes far more powerful in terms of creating the connection, because this is really where the story is. The story isn't about, well, I was going to say, the story isn't about him with his shirt off and her in a song or whatever. Or if it is, if that's what the story is, it's a different story. If we're talking about the notion of love rather than, as Pat says, sex or lust or whatever, then we're looking here. We're wanting to see, now closer up, his head coming forward, her head at a slight tilt. We've now got much of the diagonals in this, the off verticals are now able to come into play. When we've got the whole lot, the verticals are so strong it overpowers this. When we come into here, I think it just works so much better as a crop in terms of trying to create a connection. So really, that's what I would say about that one. I hope that helps, gives you some thoughts there, John. Right. Karen says the crop has made a big difference, and Sandra says, I agree with Pat, this feels more about sex than love, and the crop version works much better. Okay. Right, so let's move on then. We'll go on to, we've got Viji. Viji says, friends are like blessings, invisible yet hover around you, embracing and protecting you from the damages that head your way from time to time. So Viji has photographed this pair of friends, chatting with her separately. She was talking about there's such a lovely warm connection between these two, and that's what she was setting out to. Now, there was a little bit of posing and staging going on, but she was hoping that she still kind of created some of that connection. And I think by and large there is definitely a warmth between them. Those smiles do have a kind of genuine feel. That they're close. There's definitely a strong connection between them. In terms of composition, the only bit that sort of feels for me a little bit kind of not quite right is when you look at the girl who's standing up, her arm is very straight. There's no bend in that. And the straightness kind of indicates a sort of sense of tension or a sense of force. It's not quite as natural. And I think if she was either crouched slightly lower, leaning slightly more forward, and her arm was coming round her friend, then I think you would have that connection, that you would have that closeness, and that's the kind of thing that would really put it all together as such. I think you're definitely onto something here. You're getting really close. I think you can see the connection between them. It's just kind of ironing out that sense of, I think when you really are talking, that notion of when people are connected, emotionally connected, they relax in each other's presence. And so, arms are bent, bodies are relaxed. If there's a place of tension, whether it's tension in the mouth or the face or the arms or the body language, then that stops that sense of warm connection. I think operating being expressed quite as well. You're trying to look for that relaxed moment. So I think that kind of I hope that helps Viji. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, I think if these friends, you will have taken a whole bunch of other photos of them. If you can take photos of them again, there's obviously a warmth between them, and I think you could get some lovely photos out of that. But concentrate on the idea of trying to get that sort of relaxed connection between them, which is always difficult. I mean, let's face it, it's back to this thing of, what I talked about at the beginning is part of the problem of the photographer being present is the photographer influences the outcome of the photo. So for most people, as soon as the camera comes up, we get a bit self-conscious. And then if we're, as a couple, trying to express a sense of relaxedness with each other, then it's even more difficult, because if only one of you is relaxed, or you're not, self-consciousness gets in the way, the photographer gets in the way, which is why I think in the end this challenge was probably one of the hardest I've actually set. And apologies once again, because I hadn't realised how hard it was going to be until we got to the point whereby I realised last week I was actually setting the challenge. I was trying to work out the best way of doing this myself. Right, okay, all right, just quick flick back, and okay, so John says he liked the suggestion. April says, cute picture. Sandra says, lovely photo, the friendship really shows. Viji says, good everyone. Oh, was out, just came in. I looked at, hopefully then you just got in just in time to see us talking about your photo, Viji. April says, good timing. Okay, Viji says, yes, I got it. And we'll redo that one again. And we'll watch in full tonight. Okay, so, yeah. Watch back later. It's the great thing about YouTube, and the fact that when we do these podcasts, they are all recorded. And for anybody who's sort of relatively new, if you're interested, youtube.com/Kim Ayres, we have 95 previous episodes all sitting there. I wouldn't necessarily say it's worth going right back to episode 1 and working your way forward. I would say if you really want to sort of start watching some more, just start working your way backwards. Go back to episode 95, 94, 93, 92, or kind of take a little look through and see if there's particular topics. Each one of these has, if you look on the playlist with Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, you'll find each of them has got like a little kind of episode card in the front of them, and you will see what I'm dealing with, whether I'm setting a challenge, whether, like this one, I'm responding to a challenge, or rather the viewers are responding to the challenge, or whether I'm talking about a particular technique or photo shoot I did. So there's loads and loads in the archives if you want to go and check them out when you have time. Okay, let's move on. So yeah. Then now the next one is actually from my daughter. This is from Meg. She was desperate to put one in. She said, she decided that if she was going to, if we're talking about the love challenge, then she had to put in this photo. Which, some of you who be following and know me and my daughter Meg will probably guess that this was taken at In-House Chocolates, our favourite chocolate deli that does most wonderful hot chocolates and mochas, and it's a favourite haunt for me and Meg. I've got my scarf around me, so obviously this was a winter's day. I think this one was just before Christmas. And Meg said, I took this selfie when we were in In-House Chocolates and we had a fantastic time together. I love my dad. And I love you too, Meg. I must admit, actually, I was kind of surprised I didn't see more selfies, or any other selfies, actually, put in. Last week when I was talking about the notion of emotional connection, I put in a photo. I can't remember whether it was the same time as this one or another trip to In-House Chocolates, but I put in a couple of photos of me and Meg together, because one of the things I've found is when I am with Meg, I relax more. There is something that, my face starts to relax, and it's the tension kind of goes out. Now, with this photo, we're both looking at the phone camera that Meg's got out at arm's length. So where is trying to find that sense of connection? But the fact is, we are head-to-head touching. I think you can kind of feel a connection between us. The photo was for the phone camera, really. Whether we were ever going to put it up online or not, it was less important than the fact that actually we were documenting this little bit of moment together. Now, this is where I personally have the problem of the fact that it's almost impossible for me to critique this, because I am way too involved. Here I am, with my daughter. And so that same problem that I've pointed out to everybody else, which is when you're taking a photo, how do you express the narrative to somebody else when the problem is that you're really close and so emotionally involved in the picture that it's really difficult to be able to think objectively with it. So unfortunately with this one, I can't really think objectively with this one because I am so deeply emotionally involved with it. But lovely photo, and always lovely to be reminded by my daughter that she loves me. So thank you very much for sending that one in, Meg. I'll throw you some smug points with it as well, I think. Right, where are we? Robert says, what a great photo, Meg. Rosemary says, oh, Meg, that's such a sweet image of with your dad. Love it. Sandra says, lovely father and daughter photo. Nuria says, well done, Meg. Lovely photo. I'm rubbish at taking selfies. Viji says, lovely pic. Sandra says, agree with you, Kim, that you relax more when you are with your child or children. Karen says, there's something about fathers and daughters that is pretty special. Well done, Meg. Katie says, another heart in the bodies. The love for coffee is strong here, and a coffee date with father-daughter is such a special bonding time. Yeah, a coffee date, especially at In-House Chocolates, when you can have a mocha and you have that incredible, wonderful chocolate inside the coffee. Absolute bonding time. John says, I like the way you and your daughter are leaning into each other. It's almost a triangle. And Meg says, thank you, Dad. Yeah, I would say, actually, there's a little point with that, John, which I think is worth mentioning, which is one of the things I've talked about sometimes before, or periodically crops up in these podcasts, is I talk about how the fact that gaps get massively exaggerated in photography. So it's that, so for example, if I take, take this little torch here. If I have the torch sitting next to me, now if you were standing in the room with me where your field of view was from way over there to way over there, the gap between me and the torch is maybe only about 5% of your vision. In this here, because we're actually now got an enclosed space, this same gap is now taking up about 20% of the picture. And if I kind of come in close here, and then I've got this next to me, this gap is now taking up something like about 30 to 35% of. So if the edge of the photo is here and the edge of the photo is here, the gap becomes hugely exaggerated. Now, consider that when you've got two heads. You can have two people standing next to each other, shoulders butted up really tight to each other. And from your point of view, in the real world, they look really close together. But when the edge of the photo is sort of on one side of one person's head and the other side is on there, that gap can seem huge, can take up a third of the photo. So what I always do when photographing couples, or nearly always do, if it's right, is I get them heads touching. Get them to lean into each other a little bit and have heads touching. Now, naturally, heads very rarely touch. If Meg and I are sort of sitting in a cafe drinking a hot chocolate, we wouldn't be heads touching because it would make drinking our hot chocolate very difficult. But for the sake of the selfie, it helps enclose the composition and it makes the two of us look, it increases that sense of connection between us. So always that sense of, that it creates a triangle compositionally and it helps create the connection. So one worth remembering if you weren't already aware of it, and if you were already aware of it, hopefully anybody else listening in has also now become aware of it. So Katie says, beautiful Meg. Right. Okay, next one then I want to talk about is Martin. And so Martin sent in this one, says, I was at a local agricultural show, a yearly event in Dumfries, and was just taking several pics of livestock and activities. I was about to take a pic of the Shetland ponies when this young lady decided to show her affection. An unrehearsed moment in time, but I think it makes an interesting shot. I don't think it does, and it's great when you just sort of suddenly get that moment you weren't expecting. It would have been difficult to try and set this up as a pose, but you've managed to just capture that moment. So, and for whoever it was I was talking to earlier, was it Katie or Karen? I can't remember now. Anyway, this is an example of getting down in height. So this is where Martin is actually obviously crouching down. So he's at the same head height as the pony and the young woman who's giving the pony a kiss. And that's the perfect height to be. If he was taking it at his normal standing up height, he would be looking down on them, and it just wouldn't have the same kind of feeling. You would then feel like you were looking down on something, whereas when you're down at this level, you feel more like you're kind of sharing the experience. So I think it's much more, it works much better here. The only thing I would say again is there's a certain notion of crop. We've got now. Okay, let me just open this in Photoshop. Part of the problem here is that you as a viewer can't see it because my head is covering up part of the background here. But when you see the full photo here, the horse in the background, presumably the foal's mother, has a head chopped off. We can see a person here, a little bit distracting. There's quite a bit of space over here. And I think this is just one of these where we should just crop in closer. We don't really need all that space. The real strength is in this sort of circular part where we come up round the back of the girl and down the back of the pony and back round. So we don't need as much of that. We can pull in here. We can crop down here. Maybe just pull that up a bit. And I think when you come to something like that, then that kind of works better. And then if we were to do, well, say just create a little bit of a vignette around it, just sort of darken down the corners a little, not too much, but just subtly. Then that helps to draw your eye in a little bit more. Maybe if you want to do a bit more in the way of editing, you would darken down the white patch of the mother in the background so that that's not kind of grabbing the eye too much. Having said that, you don't want to darken it too much because you've partly got the contrast of the foal's darker head here against the white of it. But in essence, it's this part here which is where we're looking. And when we're kind of fully open, like this part here ends up being a distraction. So it's how you kind of minimise that. But that aside, I think it's an interesting photo. I think it was well caught, and have a smug point there, Martin. Why not? So thank you very much for sending that one in. Okay, where were we? Okay, so Rosemary says, I appreciate you stressing the importance of closing up the gaps. It's not a natural way of thinking, but I'm trying to adopt that perspective. It's a skill that needs to become a habit. And I think it's a good point, Rosemary. It is one of those things that photography doesn't see, the camera does not see the world the way we see it. And part of that's the attraction of photography, because we take photos and they look different to the way that we normally see them. And that's kind of exciting. However, it does mean we also have to kind of make translations. We have to translate what we're seeing when we take photos for the fact that the photo won't represent what we're seeing. So we have to make adjustments in order to get the photo to see to project what it is we want to see. And that's really what the whole thing about understanding light, composition, camera settings and everything is about, is so that we can master this idea of being able to express the narrative we want to express. It'd be good in a way that the camera won't do if you just take the shot as it is. April says, I love this photo. Presumably we're on to the foal now. Robert says, adorable. Meg says, oh, thank you for the kind comments. Sandra says, great photo. Katie says, can you zoom in on the heads? That's presumably we're talking about and that's kind of what we do. We sort of zoomed in a bit at any rate. And yes, getting down to a lower level must do more of that. Viji says it's endearing. April says, yeah, perfect with the crop. Rosemary also likes the crop, feels that the interaction between the girl and the foal is just wonderful. So Sophie says, thanks for the kind words and the smug points. Thanks for all the likes too. Karen says, love the spontaneity of this shot. Viji says, crop works better and the vignette is good too. Pat says, keep losing the page when I click nightmare. Okay, not sure what you're clicking on, but if you refresh the page or click back if you're having any problems with it. Okay, on to final photo, which I'm going to talk about today before I then tell you what's coming up next week. So the last photo I want to show you is from April. And April says, hi Kim, this is a photo of my sister and her husband. They had no idea I was going to take this picture. It was not planned. I actually made a puzzle of this photo and gave it to them for Christmas and they loved it. It's one of those silly photos. And I have to say, April, I love this photo. I think it's brilliant. Your sister's expression says absolutely everything. You know, as you say, they had no idea you were going to take the picture. Well, it's obvious you couldn't plan a picture like this in that way. The spontaneity is what grabs this. And I think going back to one of the things that I said right back at the very beginning, which is, yeah, sure, there's compositional things here which you could change. And if you were trying to set up this photo, you maybe wouldn't do it this way or that way. But get the moment right, get the story right, and ultimately content trumps composition and other techniques. But of course we are always also looking for how can we get, because if you can get the content and the composition, then that's when you really hit the jackpot and everything kind of comes together. So first of all, liberal smug points for getting this. I think your sister's expression is absolutely adorable, and there's some really nice composition. I love the way her husband's arms are coming around. She's got her kind of hand up, almost like she's trying to sort of stop him, embarrassing her in front of her sister. It's just such immense fun with this photo. There is a thought, here's one where you're standing up, you're looking down. We've talked about getting down to level. Actually, for this photo, this almost works because you are standing up, because you get that feeling of spontaneity with this. But had you been at a slightly lower level, you might have had more of the problem with the blinds of the window interfering with the back of her head. But it could still have worked had you been sort of sitting on the floor and then just happened to also capture them. I think the only thing, composition-wise, I think let me just show you again. I think almost very similar to Martin's shot with the fold, that there's bits here that we don't really need. That in essence the story is all happening over on the sort of slightly left bit. We don't need as much of that on the right here, and in which case we can probably pull that one in a little bit closer. We do want to have the elbow, I think, down here, because if we crop off the elbow, well, you can kind of get away with it a bit. Maybe you can get rid of the elbows as long as you've got the inner part of the elbow. I think if you kind of come up too far, we then lose the fact that her arm is coming back up. And then maybe if you're going to do that, you could maybe crop off the top of the cap. That's maybe slightly less, and we can come in just a little bit further. And something like that, I think, also allows you. And then similarly, we could just add in a little bit of vignette like that. Just to kind of draw our attention in, because this is really where the story is happening. It's all and also at this point, then likewise again, what we have is it's rather nice. The arm comes round here, the elbow comes here, this swings us back up. We've also got this arm that comes round here, which brings us up to here, and we've got the hair and the hats containing us. So it's all rather beautifully contained within this shape. When you've got the whole thing here, we see essentially the shape is we can see the shape is contained here. But what that means is this lot is relatively irrelevant. So That's what I would say. So thinking about ways of cropping, ways of playing around with the composition. You've got a photo. That expression is priceless. I think it's really beautiful, really wonderful to have captured that. And in fact, April goes on to say, I made a puzzle of this photo and gave it to them for Christmas and they loved it. It's just one of those silly photos. And absolutely, I can imagine that. But I think if you crop in a little bit more, then you can see how that kind of emphasises and increases the power and intensity of the narrative that you're putting across. So I hope that helps. Hope that gives you some ideas there, April. So okay, let's just check the so Naria says, I love this one. April. Sandra says, perfect natural photo. Katie says, love the puzzle gift idea. A lovely cheeky photo. Well done. Rosemary says, April, your image makes me big smile. So delightful. Pat also, real fun intimacy. April says, thanks everyone. Karen says, fab and fun. Viji says, oh, this one's amazing. Smug points of view, definitely perfect for the challenge. April seems to like the crop. Karen likes the crop too. Diane says, thanks for explaining this so well. I'm learning loads. And Katie is saying, love of the cropping. You're like the Maria Kondo of photography, Kim. Maria Kondo being about simplifying your life, series on Netflix, I think. Thank you for the compliment. Yeah, there is a thing, but it is about working out where the narrative is, and your crop always needs to reflect that. Maybe I need to do one of my very early, one of my very first, in fact, it might have even been the first or second podcast I ever did. I talked in depth about the notion of cropping. I haven't really done that since, other than the fact that it crops up in the critique sections that I do each week. There's nearly always a thing about cropping. Maybe it's worth actually just doing something on that. I'll have a think about that as maybe redoing it for the podcast at some point. Viji says the crop definitely is amazing. Yes, in my photography the arm was stiff. I understand that now. What you actually meant. Thanks for explaining in detail and critique. Cool. Okay, so those are all the photos. Thank you to everyone who sent in the images. Hopefully we've been through a lot. Everybody's got a slightly better understanding of what they could have done, what they might have done. I'm feeling a bit more inspired about how you might go out and create that notion of connection between people in future. Quick reminder that if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, would like to support them, buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is certainly one way you can do that. Next week, we're going to be talking about a photo shoot. I know I think I showed maybe one of the photos last week, but I'm going to do a photo shoot I did with Alexis Fleming, who runs an Animal Hospice. Did this photo shoot last summer for Dumfries and Galloway Life magazine. And she has an incredibly powerful connection with animals, with the animals that she takes in. So it's one of the only animal hospices which actually exists. She, rather than sort of pets and animals that are abandoned, just sort of going straight off to, or even animals that are quite ill, just sort of being put down or completely abandoned, they go to her and she sees them out to the end of their days in a warm, safe, secure, loving environment. So amazing setup, amazing connection she has with the animals. And I was out there doing a photo shoot for a magazine, and I want to show you some of the photos. So I'll talk more about that next week. So if you can turn up for that, that's next Sunday. Right, well, I hope everybody enjoys tomorrow, Valentine's Day. If you happen to have a Valentine, or even if you don't, you just want to pick out on a bit of chocolate, that's always good. Connect with your pet, your daughter, just enjoy a nice soppy movie. Tomorrow for us is Meg's birthday. Meg will be 24. She's our little Valentine's girl. So I think we're planning on probably having a lot of chocolate and celebrations too. My latest blog post was all about the fact that I have problems finishing conversations. Blogspot, kimayres.blogspot.com if you ever want to go and check out any of my blogs. I will say good night now, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you happen to be. Thank you to everybody for turning up, and all the people who sent in stuff, and see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.